Welcome to part 3 of my entry in the Great Guitar Build-Off. In this video, I will be getting started on the neck and finishing the body. Well, mostly finished. First, I'm going to lay the whole neck out on the blank I glued up in the previous video, so I know where I need to remove the bulk of the material from. Then, the entire neck is cut out from the blank. The headstock angle, the overall neck thickness, and finally the width is cut. Off camera I planed the sides of the headstock down and glued on some ears of cedar and red pine to widen the headstock to my required dimensions. Jumping ahead slightly, I'm going to go ahead and lay out the location of the 2 carbon fiber stiffening rods I will be installing in this neck to help stabilize it. Once I have the location figured out and marked, I then score along my lines with a scalpel to help guide the router plane I'll be cutting the channels with. One final check to ensure the stiffening rods are below the surface of the neck, and then I scribe them where they need to be cut. Now on to the important part, actually installing the stiffening rods. First I measure out and mix up the epoxy, and here I'm using a standard 30-minute epoxy. Thoroughly mixed, the epoxy is then applied into the channel. Now I'm not trying to fill the entire channel with epoxy here, just trying to get a good coating on all the surfaces in the channel. I then coat the stiffening rod itself with epoxy as well. Now the rods fit tightly into the channel already, but the idea here is to make sure there will be no voids around the stiffening rods once they're installed in the neck. I then firmly press the rods into place and leave the epoxy pulled up on top of them, scraping it off flush after it cures. Jumping back to the body, off camera I lined the neck up to the body, clamping it in place so I could make a temporary routing jig matching the neck. The next major step in building this guitar is carving the top, but before I can do that I need to find and cut the neck angle. First I'm going to temporarily attach the uncarved top to the rest of the body with screws, located in what will later be a pickup cavity. A router and a flush cut bit trues up the edges of the top with the rest of the body. I make this cut in several passes, making sure to always be cutting downhill of the grain for the bulk of the cut, followed by a light cleanup cut after. Now to plane the neck angle into the top itself. Just prior to this, off camera, the neck was fitted to the body and the bridge temporarily put in place. Some measurements were taken and the bottom of the neck tenon was cut to place the neck at the correct angle relative to the body for my bridge setup. With the neck angle planed into the top, the carving can begin. The outside of the top is carved in the exact same manner the back was, just in this case, I have to pay more attention to keeping the center flat in the location of the bridge. Since you already watched me carve the back in detail, I'll move through this quickly. To carve the inside of the top, I use a method frequently used by archtop guitar builders. What you just saw is a drill fixture used to drill holes in the top, leaving a precise amount of material left. The stop on the drill press is set, in this case to 1/4 inch from the top of that wooden post, leaving me with 1/4 inch of material left in the guitar's top when the holes are drilled. Once all of the reference holes are drilled, the inside is then carved with the same procedure as the outside, chiseling away the bulk of the material, refining with planes, and then finally finishing with scrapers. Here's what the top looked like after carving. As you can see here, I was laying out the hardware to get a better idea of where to place the controls and the F-holes. Speaking of F-holes, here I am cutting them out. When I actually made these cuts, I didn't have the proper blade on hand for my saw. This one's far too fine to make these cuts. You can clearly see the blade flexing and struggling to make the cut. Once the F-holes were cut out, I then carved the back to thin the edges of the F-holes. This is mainly done for aesthetic purposes, as the thick edge of the top just wouldn't look right on a finished instrument. Finally, I cut the slot and thin the top where the blade switch I will be using will mount. And here's the finished top. Next, I glue some gauze over the backs of the F-holes. I do this primarily as a preventative measure to help strengthen the wood around the F-hole, specifically where there's short grain near the top. Once the glue dries, it'll all be cleaned up and you'll never be able to see it from the outside of the finished instrument. Here is the inside of the finished top, ready to be glued to the rest of the body. As you can see, the gauze has all been cleaned up and a coat of varnish was applied on all the non-gluing surfaces to help slow the moisture exchange with the environment. And the rest of the body, label applied, varnished, and ready for glue. Now for the glue up. Finally, the mostly completed body. And our roughed out neck. In the next video, I'll be focusing mainly on the neck, starting with the fretboard, all the inlay work, and on to shaping.